What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest comedians walks onto late-night television thinking he's untouchable, only to discover that some lines should never be crossed? Tonight we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation that had everyone talking, the moment Kevin Hart's trademark confidence collided head-on with Jimmy Kimmel's sharp wit, creating a television disaster that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this wild story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this one is going to leave you speechless. The Jimmy Kimmel live show started like any other night. Jimmy delivered his opening monologue. With his usual mix of political jokes and celebrity commentary, the audience responded with their typical enthusiasm, and everything seemed perfectly normal as he prepared to introduce his first guest. But what happened next would go down as one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. My first guest tonight is a comedian, actor, and someone who never fails to make us laugh. Please welcome Kevin Hart, Jimmy announced with his characteristic smile. The audience erupted in applause as Kevin made his entrance, but something immediately felt different. His usual bouncing energy seemed muted, his smile appeared forced, and there was a tension in his posture that sharp-eyed viewers picked up on right away. The two men shook hands and Kevin took his seat, adjusting his jacket with unusual precision. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, completely unaware that he was about to navigate one of the most challenging interviews of his career. The audience was still riding the wave of excitement from Kevin's entrance, their energy filling the studio as they waited for the comedic gold they had come to expect from this pairing. "Kevin, great to have you back on the show," Jimmy began, his tone warm and welcoming. "You look good, you look relaxed. How are things going?" It was a standard opening question, the kind of softball that usually leads to a funny anecdote or a plug for whatever project the guest is promoting. But Kevin's response immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. "Relaxed? Man, I don't know about relaxed," Kevin replied, his voice carrying an edge that made Jimmy's eyebrows raise slightly. "It's hard to be relaxed when everywhere you turn, someone's got something to say about what you should or shouldn't be doing." The audience, still expecting humor, let out a few uncertain chuckles, unsure if this was set up for a punchline or something more serious. Jimmy, ever the professional, tried to steer the conversation back to lighter territory. "Well, you know what they say about being in the spotlight. It comes with the territory, right? Speaking of which, tell us about your new comedy special. I heard you tackle some pretty interesting topics in it." But Kevin wasn't interested in playing along with the usual promotional routine. "You know what, Jimmy? That's exactly the problem. Everyone thinks they know what comes with the territory. Everyone thinks they can tell me how I should handle my business, how I should respond to things, what I should and shouldn't talk about." His voice was getting louder, more animated, but not in the playful way his fans were used to. The audience was beginning to sense that this wasn't going according to script. The comfortable rhythm of a typical late-night interview was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a tension building that felt more like watching a heated argument than a friendly chat. Jimmy's smile remained in place, but his eyes showed the first signs of concern. "I mean, I get it, Kevin," Jimmy said, trying to inject some levity while maintaining control. "Everyone's a critic these days, but you've always been great at rolling with the punches, turning criticism into comedy gold. That's part of what makes you so successful." Kevin leaned forward in his chair, his body language becoming more aggressive. "Rolling with the punches? Jimmy, do you have any idea what it's like to have every single thing you say dissected and analyzed by people who have never walked in your shoes? Do you know what it's like to have your own words twisted and used against you by people who claim to be on your side?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and Jimmy found himself in the uncomfortable position of being interrogated rather than conducting an interview. The studio audience was now completely silent, the earlier excitement replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Kevin, I think maybe we're getting a little too serious here," Jimmy said, his voice showing strain. "This is supposed to be fun, remember? Why don't we talk about something lighter? Maybe tell us about your kids, or that vacation you posted about on Instagram. But Kevin Hart was past the point of being managed or redirected. You want to talk about fun, Jimmy? You want to talk about keeping things light? How about we talk about how you and every other late-night host love to make jokes about people like me when we're not here to defend ourselves? Jimmy's face showed confusion and growing concern. Kevin, what are you talking about? I don't understand where this is coming from. You don't understand? Kevin's voice took on a mocking tone. How about we discuss that little monologue you did 3 weeks ago where you had a field day with my personal life? How about we talk about how you turned my struggles into punchlines for your audience's entertainment? The color drained from Jimmy's face as he realized Kevin was referring to something specific. Kevin, that was just comedy. You know how this works. We make jokes about everyone. It's not personal. It's just entertainment. Not personal? Kevin's laugh was sharp and humorless. Jimmy, when you get up there and make jokes about my marriage, about my family, about my personal struggles, how is that not personal? When you take the lowest moments of someone's life and turn them into punchlines for your audience's entertainment, how do you justify that as just business? The audience was transfixed, watching two entertainment industry professionals strip away all pretense and engage in something that felt more real and raw than anything they had ever seen on late-night television. Jimmy found himself without his usual quick comebacks, struggling to respond to accusations that were hitting closer to home than he was comfortable with. Look, Kevin, if I said something that crossed a line, then I apologize, Jimmy said, his voice losing some of its confident edge. But you have to understand, this is what we do. You make jokes about people too. Your whole career is built on observational comedy about relationships, about family dynamics, about personal experiences. There's a difference between making jokes about your own life and making jokes about someone else's pain, Jimmy, Kevin shot back. There's a difference between comedy that builds people up and comedy that tears them down. And you know what the real difference is? Power. You sit behind that desk every night, with the power to shape how millions of people see me, see my family, see my career. I don't have that same platform to defend myself. The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and both men were clearly past the point of maintaining their professional facades. What had started as a routine late-night interview was turning into something that would be talked about for years to come. The accusation about power hung in the air like a challenge, and Jimmy realized that this wasn't just about one joke or one monologue. Kevin was calling out the entire system that Jimmy was a part of, and the host was clearly struggling to find his footing in this unprecedented situation. Kevin, that's not fair, Jimmy said, his voice rising slightly as his own frustration began to show. You're acting like I personally attacked you, like I have some vendetta against you. That's not what happened. My writers brought me material. I looked at it. It seemed funny, and I delivered it. That's literally my job. If you have a problem with comedy in general, then maybe you're in the wrong business. The words had barely left Jimmy's mouth before the entire atmosphere in the studio changed. Kevin's eyes flashed with an anger that made everyone take notice, and his response came like a verbal slap across the face. Wrong business? Kevin's voice was dangerously quiet now. Jimmy, I've been doing comedy longer than you've been hosting talk shows. I've sold out arenas. I've starred in movies. I've built an empire from nothing. Don't you dare sit there and tell me I'm in the wrong business because I have the audacity to call you out for being a bully with a television show. The word bully landed like a physical blow. Jimmy had built his career on being seen as the nice guy of late-night television, and being called a bully on his own show was perhaps the worst insult Kevin could have delivered. I am not a bully, Jimmy said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I don't attack people. I don't go after people personally. What I do is comedy, and if you can't handle comedy, then maybe you need to develop thicker skin. Kevin stood up from his chair, a move that immediately heightened the tension in the room, and caused several audience members to gasp audibly. Thicker skin? Jimmy, I've been handling criticism and attacks for years. I've dealt with controversies. I've dealt with public scrutiny. I've dealt with people questioning every aspect of my life and career. But what I won't deal with is sitting here and pretending that what you do is harmless entertainment, while you profit off making people like me look foolish. Jimmy remained seated, but his body language had shifted into something more defensive. People like you? What does that mean, Kevin? Are you suggesting that I target certain types of people? Because that's a pretty serious accusation to make without any evidence. Evidence? Kevin laughed bitterly. Jimmy, the evidence is your show. It's every monologue where you punch down instead of up. It's every joke that comes at the expense of someone who's already struggling. It's the fact that you'll make fun of celebrities who are going through personal difficulties, but you'll never make those same kinds of jokes about the executives and power brokers who actually control this industry. The accusation was getting more specific and more damaging by the minute. Kevin wasn't just angry about being made fun of, he was systematically dismantling what he saw as Jimmy's approach to comedy, calling out what he perceived as cowardice and selective targeting. Jimmy's face was flushed now, his carefully maintained composure cracking under the sustained assault. You know what, Kevin? You came on my show. You're sitting in my studio, and you're attacking me personally. If you have such a problem with what I do, why did you agree to come here? Why didn't you just turn down the booking? Kevin smiled for the first time since the interview began, but it was not a pleasant smile. I came here because I wanted to give you a chance to explain yourself. I wanted to see if you would take responsibility for the harm your jokes cause, if you would show some awareness of the impact your words have on real people's lives. But instead, you're doubling down, making excuses, and trying to make me the villain for calling you out. Harm? Jimmy's voice cracked slightly. Kevin, these are jokes. They're not meant to cause harm. They're meant to make people laugh, to give them a break from their problems. If you can't see the difference between comedy and actual harm, then I don't know what to tell you. That's exactly the problem, Jimmy, Kevin fired back, his voice rising. You don't see the harm because it's not happening to you. You don't see how your words affect people because you're protected by your position, your wealth, your platform. You get to throw stones and then act surprised when someone throws one back. The audience was completely captivated by this raw exchange, watching two successful entertainers strip away all pretense and engage in what felt like a deeply personal battle. Some audience members were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while others were leaning forward, not wanting to miss a single word. This is ridiculous, Jimmy said, shaking his head. Kevin, you're a public figure. You chose to be in the spotlight. That means people are going to talk about you, joke about you, comment on your life. That's been true for every celebrity since the beginning of time. If you can't handle that reality, then maybe the spotlight isn't for you. Kevin's response was immediate and fierce. There's a difference between commentary and cruelty, Jimmy. There's a difference between observational humor and personal attacks disguised as comedy. And there's a huge difference between punching up at people in power and punching down at people who are vulnerable. I don't punch down, Jimmy protested. I make jokes about celebrities, about public figures, about people who have chosen to put themselves in the public eye. That's not punching down, that's just comedy. Really? Kevin challenged. So when you made jokes about my marriage troubles, was that punching up or punching down? When you turned my personal pain into material. For your monologue, were you speaking truth to power, or were you just getting easy laughs at my expense? Jimmy was visibly struggling now, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to navigate this minefield of accusations. Kevin, I never meant to hurt you. If my jokes caused you pain, then I'm sorry. But you have to understand, comedy has always pushed boundaries. It's always been about finding humor in difficult situations. Don't you dare lecture me about comedy, Kevin snapped. I know comedy. I live comedy. I've made people laugh through some of the darkest times in their lives, but I've never done it by tearing someone else down. I've never built my career on other people's misery." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both men clearly past the point of no return. Jimmy looked desperately toward his producers, in the wings, while Kevin remained standing, dominating the stage with his presence and his words. The audience could sense that something unprecedented was about to happen, and the tension in the studio was so thick it could be cut with a knife. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, and everyone could sense that this confrontation was about to explode into something that would be remembered for years to come. Jimmy looked increasingly desperate, while Kevin remained, standing, his anger palpable as he prepared to deliver what would become the final blow in this verbal battle. "You want to know what the real problem is, Jimmy?" Kevin's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "The real problem is that you hide behind your desk and your writers and your corporate protection, throwing stones at people while pretending your hands are clean. You've never had to face the consequences of your words because you've never been held accountable for them." Jimmy shot up from his chair, finally matching Kevin's energy. "Accountable? Kevin, I'm accountable to my audience, to my network, to my sponsors. I don't need to be accountable to every celebrity who doesn't like a joke I made about them. That's not how this works, and you know it." "That's exactly the attitude I'm talking about," Kevin fired back. "You think because you have institutional support, because you have a platform and a paycheck, that gives you the right to say whatever you want about whoever you want. But what happens when someone fights back? What happens when someone doesn't? Just smile and take it?" Jimmy's face was red with anger now, his carefully crafted television persona completely abandoned. "You know what, Kevin? You're right. I don't have to take this. This is my show, this is my stage, and if you don't like how I run things, you can leave." The challenge hung in the air for a moment before Kevin laughed, a sound that was equal, parts amusement and disbelief. "There it is. There's the real Jimmy Kimmel. Not the nice guy persona you put on for the cameras, but the person who thinks he can dismiss anyone who challenges him." Kevin turned toward the audience, his voice projecting across the entire studio. "This man sits behind that desk every night and makes jokes about people's pain, about their struggles, about their personal lives. He profits from other people's misery while pretending to be your friend. And when someone calls him out on it, his response is to throw them out, rather than take responsibility." The audience was split, some nodding in agreement with Kevin's words, while others looked uncomfortable with the direct attack on their host. Jimmy realized he was losing control not just of the interview, but potentially of his own audience. "That's enough," Jimmy said, his voice cutting across Kevin's speech. "Security, please escort Mr. Hart off the stage." Kevin's eyes widened with vindication. "And there it is, folks. When Jimmy Kimmel can't win an argument, he just has you removed. When he can't defend his actions, he uses his power to silence the criticism." Two security guards appeared, moving cautiously toward Kevin. The comedian looked at them, then back at Jimmy, then directly into the camera. "I'll leave, Jimmy, but not because you're throwing me out. I'll leave because I've said what I came here to say." Jimmy stood frozen behind his desk, watching as his show imploded in real time. The audience was murmuring among themselves, clearly divided in their reactions to what they had just witnessed. As Kevin reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. "Jimmy, you had a chance to be better tonight. You had a chance to show some humanity, some accountability. Instead, you chose to prove every point I made about you." With that, Kevin Hart walked off the stage, leaving behind a stunned host, a divided audience, and millions of viewers trying to process the most explosive late-night television moment in history. Jimmy remained standing for several long seconds, the silence in the studio almost unbearable. You could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. His usual quick wit had completely abandoned him, and for the first time in his hosting career, Jimmy Kimmel looked genuinely shaken. The audience didn't know how to react. Some were applauding Kevin's bold stand, while others sat in uncomfortable silence, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Jimmy's visible struggle to regain his composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy finally said, his voice barely steady, "I apologize for what just happened here tonight. This is not how we usually conduct business, and I want to assure you that we'll be back to our regular programming when we return." His words felt hollow, like he was reading from a script that didn't exist. But the damage was done. In the span of less than 20 minutes, Kevin Hart had dismantled not just Jimmy Kimmel's comfortable hosting style, but had challenged the entire foundation of how late-night television operates. The confrontation had exposed something raw and uncomfortable about the relationship between hosts and their celebrity guests, about power dynamics in Hollywood, and about the real cost of entertainment that comes at someone else's expense. As the show cut to commercial, viewers were left with the image of Jimmy Kimmel standing alone on his stage, looking more vulnerable and uncertain than anyone had ever seen him. The confident host who had built his career on quick comebacks and easy laughs had been reduced to stammering apologies and calling security. The aftermath would dominate social media for weeks, with clips of the confrontation going viral and sparking debates about comedy, accountability, and the responsibility that comes with having a platform. But in that moment, all anyone could focus on was the unprecedented sight of a late-night talk show host being systematically dismantled by his own guest. What do you think about Kevin Hart's decision to confront Jimmy Kimmel directly? Was he right to call out the late-night comedy system, or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories that the mainstream media won't tell you.